How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today I want to do a video on the basics of compression, where I go through explaining what compression is, and I've got 3 examples on this track of how to use compression. So when you come across it and when you want to use it, you'll have a better idea and understanding on how to use compression in your track. Now, to start off, I want to do a little bit of explanation on what compression is, as there are a little bit of confusion and a misunderstanding around compression and what it is actually used for. A lot of people think compression, especially like beginners and a lot who don't really understand it, they think compression makes the sound louder. That isn't entirely true. Compression actually makes the sound quieter. However, when you use the gain afterwards to make up for the gain reduction, it sort of makes it louder. It makes it more consistent. So compression is more about kind of bringing out the more absent sounds in the whether it's like an instrument or a vocal. It's compression is there to basically, it squishes down the louder sounds to make up for it with the quieter sounds. So compression, a lot of the time you use it on the loud sounds, and it basically is by compressing an instrument like a kick, the more quieter, softer sounds will then be more noticeable because you're controlling more of the louder sounds. It makes the dynamics more even and more consistent. That is what compression is. So we'll go through here. In fact, I'll let you listen to this little loop that I made. I'm going to be honest with you, I've been making this the last like 10 minutes or so, and I'm really liking it. I might keep it for a beat in the future. But I'll play this, and then you'll hear it before I use any compression, and then you'll hear it after I use compression. I just think those chords, they sound disgusting, but I like them. So there's the track, and then if you listen to the track here and pay attention to the snare, sometimes the snare peaks a little bit. Now what I will say is compression will be more noticeable on live sounds, things like vocals or an actual live drum recording. When you're using digital sounds, I don't think you'll notice it quite as much, because it will be naturally more consistent with like the velocity. However, with the dynamics, there will still be a noticeable difference. So we'll use the kick to begin with, and we'll go to through the compressor. And with a kick, anywhere between really 4 to 8 dB in gain reduction, you should really go for. If you're anything more than 8, or really, sometimes it is necessary, that a lot of the time it won't. Now I normally go for around 6.6 is alright. I can never get on there. That should be okay. That's a moderately strong reduction, and the threshold is basically the gain reduction. How much are you taking away from the dynamics, you know, in the louder sounds? And then the ratio is for every like 3.1, it will let a sound go past, if that makes sense. So every 3 decibels that exceeds the threshold, it will let one go past. That is basically the best way I can explain it to you. So I'll go for about 3.5, and the attack is how quickly it takes the threshold, not the threshold, the compression to kick in, start working. So I'll go for around 22, and the release is how long it will take for then the compression to basically stop being active. So I'll go for around 240 or so, and then the gain is making up for how much you take away. Although I often find if I went for 6.6, it will be far too loud. So about 5.5, I just give it a little bit of breathing space, bit of headroom to work with. So now if I solo this, and then I take away the compression and let you hear the kick on its own uncompressed, and then with it, it does make it more boomy, and a good example, if I take away the gain here, this would be a good example of how I can never get it straight on. We'll go 0.1. So this goes to show the compression doesn't make a sound louder. But then when you add the gain to it, it's the gain you add after you apply the threshold and the compression. The gain is what makes it louder. The compression itself doesn't actually make the sound louder. That's the best way I can explain it to you. So like I said, with a kick, I wouldn't advise anything below maybe like 10 on the attack. It'll be too quick and you'll lose the impact of the kick. This is a really, really common mistake a lot of people make when they first get into mixing and mastering, or just, you know, beat making, composing, is they don't understand. If you add, especially something like a snare, you'll lose that snap of the snare, and I'll show you that in a second now. So around 10 to 30 is reasonable. I like to go in the middle, around 20. So then we'll move on to the snare. And for this, I'm going to go a little bit stronger on the threshold. About 7.5. And again, I don't really like going more than around 3.2, 3.3. And I'll do a really quick attack. But then if I bring it up, it's just got a little bit more of that harsher, is that even a word? More harsh kind of snap to it. It's subtle, but it's an important difference. That's the best way you should look at it. And then with the release, I think 200 is probably pretty reasonable in all fairness. And then I'll add about 6 or so. It's a little too loud. Out there, it's alright. Although we'll bring this down here. So it's quite easy to use once you understand it. And that is the first example, is directly applying a compression to the instrument. Now another example you might instantly might come across is you might be mixing a track, you got everything balanced, but like in here, you see how that snare is starting to now peak because of how loud it is. So you might want to go to the drum bus here, and we'll just quickly right click, route to this track, same with the kick, route to this track. Using a bus, you might just want to use very subtle and soft compression just to kind of control it a little bit more. You wouldn't want to add too much. 3 to 6 typically would be reasonable on like a drum bus. And again, I'll go 20 on the attack. And I wouldn't do much more than maybe like 2, maybe like 1.5. Something like this, just so you get better control, especially with them percussive hits that sometimes can peak in a track, and it can be a headache, especially when you come to the mastering if you don't control that. Yeah, bring the drum bus down, forgot to mention that. So it's still peaking a little bit as well. So just bring it up, simple. And you see that start to come down. So that is your like the second example of how you might want to use compression in a track. It's quite simple. And then the third way would be mastering. Now obviously with mastering you'd probably do your EQ, then limiting first, and then you'd use compression if necessary. And again, quite similar to the drum bus really, you wouldn't add much, maybe like 2. And I wouldn't really recommend going much more. and something like that in the ratio, maybe to 2.5. I wouldn't recommend going above that. And around maybe 30, because you want to make sure that's 18, around 30 or so, and release, maybe around like 220 or so. I might even go medium. It really depends on the track. Some tracks might require a little bit more of a harsher threshold. It wouldn't be much more than 2.5 though. It would be very, very rare you come across something like that. So guys, that is essentially all the basic information you need to really know about compression. I will go through it again on here. So your threshold is how much you're taking away. So like, it's always, the compression is about controlling the loud sounds and just how loud you want it. And it just brings out the more quieter, soft sounds. A good example would be vocals. Let's say you get a vocal recording, and in the vocals you have the chorus. It will be more stronger singing for the vocals, and then in the verses it will be much more soft. It'll have moments where it's very, very soft, and you can't hear those quieter vocals. But if you bring up the volume on the fader, the loud vocals will be too loud. And a good way of getting a nice balance of that would be using a compression on those louder sounds. So you make them more controlled, a little bit quieter, so you can hear the softer sounds, and then when you use your gain, you can bring it up, and as well as using the fader to get to a more balanced point. That is all compression is used for, typically. That is what it's used for. So I hope this has been useful for you, and you've learned something from this video, and I do apologise maybe if my delivery or explanation hasn't been too clear. I'm working on it with each tutorial video that I do. So if you have any feedback, always comment below. Message me on Instagram at uniterical.music, I will reply. And if you have enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if you haven't already, subscribed. Otherwise guys, that is all for today. Thank you very much for watching.